Hello there, my name is James Harrington. If Spanish football is for you, then this is the place to be. Today we're just doing a quick video on my thoughts of the Spanish national team's performance at the Euros this summer. The last video I did on the channel was the preview to the Italy semi-finals. We all know how that went, but it just felt slightly unfinished. So today we're just going to review all the things that came out of the tournament for Spain. It's going to be a very casual, free-flowing discussion. I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts, but let's get into it. The question I want to begin with is, have our expectations been met or exceeded? Now, in my preview video before the tournament began, I predicted that Spain will get as far as the semi-finals, because at that point I felt they'll come up against too good an opposition for them to overcome and beat. And it came true, because they had to play the Italians, who eventually were Euros champions. But in light of that defeat, I think it's fair to say that in that match, Spain put in a really convincing performance. They went toe-to-toe with the Italians, and in some quarters it might be said that Spain actually deserved the victory. As fans of the national team, I think as well it's fair to say that our confidence grew throughout the tournament in the team's capabilities. If you look at the first two matches where they drew to Sweden and Poland, there was clearly unrest amongst the fan base, and fair enough, they were very flat, very dull performances. But against Slovakia, the shackles came off, they got the 5 goals, and that gave a whole new sense of positivity around the Spanish national camp. They then went on to play Croatia, where they got 5 goals. They then beat the Swiss in the quarterfinals, and then obviously they came up against the Italians. Now with the Italians, as I said earlier, they went toe-to-toe with them. For large spells, they dominated the game. They had a number of good opportunities to take the lead. And it must be said, when they went a goal down to the Chiesa goal, they demonstrated a great deal of resilience, of fight to get the leveller and take the match all the way to penalties. Now, with regards to my assessment, I'm teetering between the two. Have they met my expectations or have they exceeded? Now, by the mere fact they got to the semi-finals, they've de facto met my expectations. However, I think you've now got to look at the context that the Spanish team were operating, and it really does depend if you're a glass half full, half empty kind of person. Considering the struggles that they had in the March internationals, considering the various challenges going into the tournament, such as COVID, for example, and considering the poor start, I think it's actually fair to say that the Spanish national team exceeded our expectations. And it's really important when answering this question to have the caveat in mind is we can't get caught up in past grandeurs about the Spanish team. I mean, they're not the team of 2008 to 2012. They're an entirely different entity with entirely different challenges. As well, let's compare them to the eventual victors, Italy. It's fair to say that Italy are a more complete team. Mancini took over in 2018, and he's further along in the Italian rebuild compared to Spain. In large part, that's due to the understandable personal absence that Luis Enrique took from being at the helm of the national team. But that meant this team is still very much in transition. I think the key thing here is that they just don't lose momentum. The next thing I want to talk about is my player of the tournament. I imagine we're all thinking the same person. It has to be the 18-year-old Pedri. Now, in the preview before the Italy game, what I said was great was, for those who don't watch La Liga week in, week out, what Pedri has done is he's truly announced himself on the world stage. With Pedri, let's not forget that he only received his senior call-up to the Spanish national side back in March. And I said in my pre-tournament preview, I didn't see Pedri as an automatic starter. I felt that he was going to this tournament to get some vital experience, to a crucial member in tournaments to come. However, I was proven wrong. He was one of the first names on the team sheet and was so critical for Spain this summer. He only missed 1 minute of football. He made it as the Uefa Young Player of the tournament, and he made it into the team of the tournament. His stats don't lie. They're just so impressive. He's got a 92.3% pass completion rate. He covered 76 kilometres, which is the third highest of any player at the tournament. He made 11 key passes, and as well, he leads the tournament for solo runs into the attacking third with 27. So he's so important for how Spain were going forward. With Pedri, let's bear in mind the fact that only 1 year ago, he was playing the Segunda Division for Las Palmas. Fast forward 12 months, he is one of the hottest prospects on the continent. His potential seems to know no bounds. And for me, his emergence this summer on the European stage and the world stage is one of the biggest positives to come out of the tournament for Spain. So the next thing I want to talk about is my honourable mentions, and I think there's two players in particular that deserve some praise. Number one being Jordi Alba. Now Jordi Alba, for me, was electric this summer. With his overlapping runs, he led the team in terms of crosses, in terms of progressive passes, and as well was third in terms of shot creating actions, never neglecting his defensive duties, but sometimes it felt, especially in the first two matches, he was Spain's really only attacking outlet. The second player I want to talk about is Dani Olmo, who had a great deal of impact in those later games, especially against Croatia with his 2 assists, and against Italy when he was playing that false nine where he truly flourished. Now let's take away from the fact that he missed his penalty, which isn't great, but in that match against Italy, when Spain were going toe to toe, he was truly thriving, and Spain's performance was in large part to how good he was performing on the night. So for me, he definitely deserves recognition for his contribution this tournament. So the next thing to discuss is surprise of the tournament. Now, this slightly does blur with honourable mentions, but I wanted to call out this player in particular. And for me, that's Pablo Sarabia. When he was included in Luis Enrique's squad, quite frankly, I had no real idea about him. Due to the fact he plies his trade in Liga, it felt like a surprise inclusion. And I wasn't sure if he was going to make much of an impact. Well, frankly, he proved me wrong. Pablo Sarabia got 2 goals against Slovakia and Croatia, as well as 2 assists. It was such a shame not to see him play in the semi-finals, ruled out due to a persistent muscle injury. And rumour has it that he will be possibly coming back to La Liga this summer, something I do want to see. He made the difference at times, and for me it was the surprise of the tournament. So the next accolade I need to hand out, and it's not a nice one, it's the who was the biggest disappointment of the tournament. And for me, it's Gerard Moreno. I had hoped that Gerard Moreno would bring his red-hot form that he had for Villarreal into the tournament and set the stage alight. He was involved in 40 goals for Villarreal, scored 30 of them last season, and of course won that Europa League medal. However, there are 2 moments to stand out in my mind with regards to Gerard Moreno, and they're not good ones. They're the penalty miss against Poland, and as well the glorious opportunity missed against Switzerland, which meant the game could have been dealt with in extra time and not having to go all the way to penalties. Now, his fellow striking partner Alvaro Morata has showed a lot of the blame this summer and has had the burden of the claim that Spain lack that cutting edge. Well, I think Gerard Moreno should take his equal share of that burden. Just quickly on Alvaro Morata, I feel like it's too harsh to name him the disappointment of the tournament. I think his tournament has been very mixed. He, of course, missed key penalties, but he's well got some key goals. He became Spain's top scorer at a European Championship against the backdrop of immense media pressure. At times, he was the scapegoat for Spain's poor performances. So in light of that, I don't think Morata's been the disappointment of the tournament. And with going back to Moreno, I think the problem here is, and it's my own fault, I'm just such a fan of Gerard Moreno. I built up his stature in my mind. I think he was going to be causing such a great deal of impact for Spain. I even named him in my starting 11. But for me, he just didn't hit the ground running. Next, I want to talk about Luis Enrique. Now, when Luis Enrique announced his squad, he came under fierce criticism. It was seen as a betrayal by the mere fact he omitted Sergio Ramos from the Euros. As well, he came under criticism for the fact he selected no Real Madrid players. Brighton Hove Albion of the Premier League had more players in the Spanish national team than Real Madrid. Barcelona only had 3. As well, it felt with his squad it was finely balanced between youth in terms of Ferran Torres and Pedri and experience as Azpilicueta and Sergio Busquets. On top of all of this as well, he was able to convince Laporte to convert his allegiances from France to Spain. However, I think it's fair to say his selection off the back of the team performances has been vindicated. What Luis Enrique has been able to do is salvage the reputation of the Spanish national team off the back of that embarrassing 2018 World Cup campaign. And let's be frank, Spain really haven't come close to winning any of the past 3 major tournaments, and he almost got Spain all the way through to the final. What Luis Enrique was able to demonstrate is a few things. One, that he is tactically flexible. I did wonder this before the Italy game, whether he would change things up. And of course he's clearly wedded to his 4-3-3 possession-based style of football, but in the opening games he was able to evolve the team's style of play. They were criticised for being sidewards and very negative, but then it became more about pressing, it became more about being aggressive. It was much more intense in the following matches. And then against Italy, they played a false 9, which they were clearly comfortable with. The next thing that was very clear about Luis Enrique, and I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing, because he kept fidgeting with his starting lineup, but one thing that was clear was he knows the heart of the team, that Pedri, Busquets, Koke trio. Those are the players that set the tempo and set the style of play. And whilst you can say that maybe changing the attacking department, the defensive line isn't great, I guess the counter to that is he's managing the squad's expectations. There's a number of experienced players that would want to play. So he clearly has one element of the identity firmly ironed out. As well, what Luis Enrique demonstrated was that he trusts his players. Again, as I said, choosing 23 players was very much eyebrow raising. And a key player that it showed that he backed when it was a really difficult moment for him was Unai Simon. After that awful own goal that he conceded against Croatia, he still selected him for the next match against Switzerland in the quarterfinals, and Unai Simon paid him back, pulling off a number of crucial saves and as well as penalty saves. As well, what Luis Enrique demonstrates was the fact that he supports his players. And I'm thinking in particular Alvaro Morata. He didn't throw him under the bus when the media were kind of laying the blame for Spain's struggles at Morata's door. He firmly stood by him, and it's great to see a manager standing by his team. Finally, what Luis Enrique was able to really motivate the team in face of some really difficult challenges. I'm thinking the COVID outbreak, the injury to Busquets. Now, that all being said, I've just waxed lyrical about Luis Enrique, but it's clearly his job isn't done. There are a few things that he does need to fix. One, let's quickly get over it, fix the attacking department, get them firing on all cylinders, and as well end this curse of penalties. Two, he needs to bleed in the next generation of young talent. Spain have a number of brilliant players with brilliant potential. And if you look at the team that played against Lithuania when there was that COVID outbreak, those youngsters who stepped into the senior side, a number of them will be knocking on his door. The next thing to say with Luis Enrique is he needs to get the team competing at that next level. They can very much compete against, good teams like Italy, like Croatia. But what he needs to do is get them to that next level where they can totally dominate and win games comfortably like they did way back in the 2008-2012 era for Spain. Now, Football España said that if he qualifies for the 2022 World Cup, he will secure a new deal, which seems fair and proper. He clearly is the man to, I think, take Spain going forward and continue this rebuild project. And for me, Luis Enrique has really put in a good performance this summer. Well, what next? We have the Olympics before the La Liga season starts. Now, the Olympics in football is normally made up of under 23s and a few more experienced pros. But why this is so important for fans of Spanish football is that it's a good litmus test to see the next generation at play. They've got a really tough group. Argentina, Australia, Egypt, all solid and good footballing nations. A number of players who feature the Euros have also been selected for the Olympics. You've got Pedri, Dani Olmo, Pau Torres, Miguel Oyarzabal and Eric Garcia, to name a few, alongside other players who didn't feature like Marcos Asensio. The last time Spain won gold in the football was in 1992 at the Barcelona Games. As I say, they are the favourites, and this is it'll be a really interesting tournament to witness to see if the players, in particular those who are at the Euros, are fatigued or if they will step up for this showpiece event. So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say that everyone involved in the Spanish national football team setup should be really proud of themselves. Expectations were really low going into the tournament. There wasn't much in the way of media or public hype. And I very much agree with Luis Enrique when he was consoling his players after they got knocked out by the Italians. He was saying there's no need to cry, use the experience, learn from it, come back even stronger. And I'm very much optimistic about Spain's future tournament hopes. Fortunately for them, the next tournament, that being the World Cup, is only 1 year away. And a lot of these players will either grow in experience or the older pros will still very much be around. It's not going to be like the Croatians who lost a lot of their spine of the team in between tournaments. And I just want to add before I sign off in this video, if La Liga football is for you, then why not hit that subscribe button if you have enjoyed my Euros content. With regards to La Liga, I do weekly videos where I preview the upcoming games, talk about any interesting news happening in Spanish football. So if that is for you, then definitely hit that subscribe button. But thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.